Hi everyone, wife and I out riding the Spider in the North Carolina countryside, and thought I'd get on here and tell you a little more about some of my flying experience. Now I've loved to fly. I loved airplanes and everything about airplanes since I was a little kid. Where a lot of people were building models of ships or hot rods and cars, things like that, I was always buying and building airplane models. And first thing of course, they were non-flying models. These were the old plastic ones you buy, made by Revell or somebody like that. And of course, first thing I would do when I got them finished would go out in the yard and try to fly them and tear them all to pieces. But that was okay back in the day. They didn't cost a lot. I had a little bit of an allowance, and my folks would let me go up to what was then the hardware store close by, and they had a little section of hobbies, and they had all kinds of models, and it was really great, and I loved it. And but when I got older, I kept wanting to try to learn to fly, but like so many things, it just didn't work out for the longest time. Finally, I did get an opportunity, but before I even hooked up with someone to fly, the Ultralight movement had started in the United States here, and you could buy, for really not very much money, you could buy a kit to put together, and you could build your own little ultralight airplane that would carry just you. Now, the rules in the early days was that in order to qualify as an ultralight, it had to be foot launchable. You had to be able to pick this thing up and run with it and get into the air. Now, your particular one you built didn't have to do that, but the manufacturer had to demonstrate that they could build one and put it together and foot launch it, and it would fly as they had intended it to. So I jumped in pretty early. I bought a kit called the Weedhopper, and I'm going to put some pictures up of this. I don't actually have a picture that I know of that I actually took of it completed. I just was so anxious to fly and all that with it, I don't think I ever did. I still have parts of the plane around, and I'll tell you about that. A friend of mine turned out he had an airplane and he was learning to fly, and I told him that I was interested in learning to fly, and he took me down to the airport where he was learning and introduced me to the people, and I went ahead and that's how I got my pilot's license. Took me a little over a year, but I got it. In the meantime, I had bought this Weedhopper, and it was aluminum frame with thin nylon material that forms the wings, and it was just a matter of cutting aluminum tubing that was already pre-bent and drilling holes in it, putting reinforcing wooden dowels in there wherever a bolt would go through, and bolting it together according to the plans. And it went together pretty straightforward. The motor that came with it was a single cylinder, two-stroke, and I don't know how big it was. I might be able to look it up for you, but whatever the standard motor was that came with it. And you got a propeller and you got the motor. Well, the engine had no electrical system. It had literally the motor and a set of points. And you had to get a coil and wire it up yourself, put a switch on it, all that stuff. Again, that really didn't present any problems. I got throttle cables, ran them down. I made a really nice seat out of seatbelt webbing that I bought a roll of, and using the aluminum tubes they supplied, I wove a really nice seat for it. Eventually I got it all done. It took forever, but I finally got it finished, and I got it finished a short time after I had gotten my pilot's license. Now, this was between the time that I got my license and the time that I bought my airplane, my real live airplane. So I took the Weedhopper out to the airport and assembled it, put it all together, and was playing around with it on the runway. Now, this is an uncontrolled field, which means that it's see and avoid, which means that I have to just make sure that nobody's landing or taking off when I'm landing or taking off, so that you don't have any conflicts. And so I would get in this thing and get out and get on the runway and run it up, taxi it real fast down the end of the runway, and see how it was handling, whether it was trimmed right or how it was performing. And again, this is a very crude aircraft. It's just aluminum tubes. It didn't really have a formed wing. It just had some bent aluminum tubes that gave the rough approximation of a wing shape. Had flat tail and a flat elevator and rudder, and but it was cool, and it was mine. And so I kept running this thing up and down the runway, and tweaking the motor and trying to get as much power out of it as I can. Well, when I originally bought the kit, I weighed about 180 pounds. And that was well within the weight limits of the motor and the airframe and the performance of the motor. When I was finally getting around to checking it out, I had been married for a while, and I'd put on, about 35 pounds of ugly belly fat. And so I was right at the limit of what it would take, what it would be able to fly according to the book, if I had done everything exactly right. And so I'm running down the runway I'm going faster and faster and faster, and finally I get going fast enough to where it starts lifting off, and I'd get it up about, about a foot or so, get the wheels up about a foot or so off the runway and fly down to the end of the runway and land again, just making sure that I always had the runway underneath me, and I would play around with it, experiment with it. Well, I did this more and more, and I'd get higher and higher, and finally I was able to get up to about 10 feet down the runway, up about that high, and go down the runway and then still land. And it wasn't a real long runway, a little over 2,000 feet. And but it was enough. It was long enough to get it up in the air. And I was flying my little ultralight for about, maybe about 10 seconds, and then have to land again. Well, the thing that you got to know about aircraft is there's a thing called ground effect. Now, ground effect is the reaction of the compressed air underneath your wing to the ground underneath it. And it gives the airplane more stability and more lift if you're in ground effect. So all this time that I'm running up and down the runway, I'm in ground effect. Well, ground effect only works about half the wingspan of the airplane, and I think this thing had a little over a 20-foot wingspan. So when I was getting up over about 10 feet, I was getting out of ground effect. Well, one day, a beautiful afternoon, I decided today's the day. Everything's been going so well, the motor's running great, and I'm going to give this thing a try. And took it off the runway. I had a little bit of a headwind, and so it actually jumped off the runway a little quicker than normal, and that even fueled my fire even farther. And so next thing I know, I'm 15, 20, 25, I'm 30 feet up over the runway, and there is no way that I'm going to be able to get back down and land on how much runway is left. And there are trees at the end of the runway, so I don't really have an option of landing and then running off the end, because there's just nowhere to go but trees ahead of me. And now this thing doesn't fly very fast. It probably flew at about, 35 miles an hour. That was, how fast it flew. So that's like about this fast. We're going 37 now. About this fast is about as fast as it would go. And so, I'm climbing up, and I get up there, and I'm looking at the trees that are coming up, and I'm still climbing really good. And I said, well, this is no problem. Because I could have, even at that moment, I could have banked back to my left and gone around, and made a tight turn and made around and come back and landed on the runway behind me. It would have been a tough maneuver, but I could have done it. But I saw the trees coming, and I realized that I was actually above the level of the trees I was going to have to go over, and it was just a thin line of trees. Then the ground dropped away behind them about 20 feet, and it was an open field. And so I said, well, heck, let's just go for it. I'll just do a regular fly around in the pattern and come back and land. So went ahead and did that, and cleared the trees. As soon as I cleared the trees, I don't know if it was because I was now well out of ground effect because the land has fallen away from me, or whether I just don't know or whether I've got a crosswind or what happened. The plane immediately dropped 10 feet. Boom, just like that, just went down. And I am wide open. I have got the little throttle pushed all the way forward. In fact, I'm actually starting to bend the thin little metal tab that was the throttle. I'm starting to bend it. Because I want to get more and more power out of the engine. And as I drop down into this field on the back side of the trees, I look and there's power lines. Oh, I don't know, maybe as far as the railroad tracks here in front of us. And so I have to, but it's a big field, and so I know I'm not going to make it over the power lines. So I just make a gentle left bank and I go around in a circle. Well, as I circle around, I see that I'm in a field that is bounded by the power lines on one side and tall trees all around it. So I'm kind of trapped in this field. I wasn't panicking right away because I was still, I don't know, 15, 20 feet easy above the field. And I looked down into the field and then I started getting concerned. It was probably the best rabbit hunting in the whole state. It was 8 or 9 foot tall high, nothing but briars. It was a briar forest, so to speak. And it looked rough. And I said, if I go down in that, I'm going to really get torn to ribbons. And so I'm trying my best not to go down. I'm trying to figure out what I can do to get this plane up in the air. Now, thinking back on it, what I should have done was gone ahead and flown toward the power lines and let myself dip down and fly under them. Just so you can see how tall the lines are. I could have easily flown under them because this thing was not a very tall airplane. But I wasn't really, I was kind of panicking at this point. And I was just trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do. So I'm continuing around in my circle. And I look and I say, well, I might just be able to get enough speed if I dive just a little bit to pop up over that thin line of trees and get back to the runway. But which way is the runway? Because I really wasn't sure. So I went around again and I looked at the tree line really carefully, and I saw a little notch in the trees between where one smaller tree than the rest. And I said, that must be where I came through. And so I went as close to the wires as I could, got as much of a run and start as I could at it, dipped the nose a little bit, got it going as fast as it would possibly go, and right at the last minute I pulled up and I cleared that through that little notch with the airplane. Well, it turned out I was wrong. That wasn't the runway. That was another field. It was a field about half the size of the one I had been in, with just as many briars and just as many power lines. The problem with this field was in the very center of it was a bunch of trees and stumps and brush that had been pushed up in there years before that nobody had bothered, that they hadn't bothered to burn. They were going to put it in there to burn it, I guess, and they never got around to it. So it was, the pile was about 10 feet high, and I'm circling over about 10 feet over it. So I'm still circling in this field. I got nothing I can do. I'm just circling. I'm trying to figure out what in the heck am I going to do. And the briars went so close to the road, so tall, I didn't think I could get in under the wires to get to the other side where the field was cut and looked like a good place to land. So I kept going in a circle, trying to figure out what in the hell am I going to do. And as I'm doing this, because I'm in such a tight turn, I'm starting to lose altitude. A little bit at a time, I'm dropping down. Pretty soon I'm only about 15 feet above the ground and only 5 feet above this cut pile when I go over it. And so I just don't really know what to do. So in desperation, I said, well, maybe I can figure out a way to get over the trees again. And I looked back to the little gap where I had been, and I said, well, it's all I can do is try. And so I circled and got as much speed as I could, came in as close as I could to the power lines, made my turn, and dove right at the top of that brush pile. And I swear I think my wheels might have gone through some weeds growing on the top of it. I was so low. And the very last second, again, I pulled up. Well, as soon as I pulled up, I knew that I had nowhere near enough airspeed to get over those trees. Now, fortunately, like these trees right here, they were real spindly. There wasn't a whole lot to them. It wasn't like a big oak tree like this one. And I hit the trees in a nose-up attitude. Just as the plane stalled, I mushed into the treetops, And I'd say the trees were, oh, I don't know, 10 feet taller than where I was sitting in the airplane. And those trees grabbed the branches and all, wrapped around the wings and the landing gear and me. And of course the propeller hit, as soon as the propeller hit the trees, it just exploded. It was a wooden propeller and it just exploded and went everywhere. And the motor quit. And I'm now flush into the trees, flat into them, and thank God I didn't flip over backwards. But what happened was, those trees and tree branches let me slowly down all the way to the ground, and the plane eased onto the ground, and I literally unhooked my seatbelt and stepped out of the plane onto the ground. Totally unhurt. I did not have a scratch. And of course I'm still in shock, because here I've just had my first airplane crash. And then the fun part, I tried to figure out how to get out of the field. And again, I tell you, there were about 8 or 9 foot briar patch. There was no path, no way to get through the woods, was no way around it. I had to just push my way through the briars. By the time I got to the street, I was a bloody mess. And that's about the time the guys at the airport showed up looking for me. And so they thought I was really hurt bad. They ran up to me and asked me if I was okay. I said, yeah, I'm fine, I'm just scratched. And we were able to recover the airplane. Got my pickup truck, and I just rode through all the briars and mashed them down, and got to it. And some of the guys rode in the back of the truck and actually held the ultralight up over their heads, and we drove it back out to the street where I took it apart. And it wasn't really damaged, just a few bent little pipes, and of course a destroyed propeller. And I immediately went home and ordered a bigger motor. Excuse me. And that motor sits on a shelf in my garage today, because before I ever got around to putting it back together, I ended up finding and buying that Luscombe 8E that I bought, and that's where my flying went from there. But the whole reason I got into flying was to do the open cockpit, you know, the wind in your face kind of thing. And that was the only time I got to do it and actually fly, was in the Weedhopper. And parts of it are still around the house. The frame is still there. It's been sitting in the woods for years now. So it's not any good. And I guess somebody could put it back together, but not me. But that was it. That was the story of my Weedhopper and the one time I ever crashed an airplane. Oh well, thought you might enjoy it. Y'all take care.